So I'm here with Carl Hawke, who's an ecologist with the National Trust, and we're standing underneath a huge oak tree, which Carl just gave a hug. Can you tell us why you did that, Carl?
Yeah, I'm very passionate about trees, but the reason I hugged it was actually to try and get some idea of how large this tree is, and it's about 6 meters in circumference, and I estimate that makes it's an oak tree, and that makes it probably anything between 700 years old. So it predates the existence of the parkland and the house here by many hundreds of years. So it was obviously here long before Adam was born or thought about a designed landscape, but he's incorporated into the landscape, and we've got loads of trees like this around Kedleston. There are 13 ancients which are even bigger and older than this one, and I think there's about 135 trees of this kind of size and girth antiquity, and they're really important open crown parkland trees. If you look at it, you might get the impression that it doesn't look well because it's got so many holes and nooks and crannies and crevices, and the bark's peeling off in places. There are snapped off branches with rotting ends, but that's really important for the invertebrate community that likes to live in these trees. This tree is probably rotten to the core, but it could still easily be standing here in another 300-400 years time and still be absolutely fine. It's not just invertebrates that live on trees like this. The holes are often used by, I know one nearby has a roost site for tawny owl. They're used for barn owls for nesting, by barn owls for nesting as well, and other hole nesting birds like the woodpeckers and the blue tits and the great tits and things, and even starlings and house sparrows. So they're really important sites for wildlife per se. And then there's another group of organisms that like to live on ancient trees like this, and that's fungi, toadstools and things like that. There are a whole group of them that only live on trees, ancient and rotting trees. In fact, it's the fungi that causes the decay in the trees and sets the whole cycle off. And some of these fungi are really rare. We have one here at Kedleston that's called the oak polypore, and Kedleston is one of only 18 places in the whole of the country where that toadstool actually exists. And it grows on an oak tree that's about 700 or 800 years old.
I know that we have lots of bat species at Kedleston as well, and the ancient trees are obviously quite important for them. Could you tell us something about bats?
Yes, again, hollow trees, hollow branches on trees often provide roost sites for bats. A study that was done by the Derbyshire Bat Conservation Group for us a few years ago showed that Kedleston's a really important place for bats. We have something like 11 different species of bat. They don't all live in the trees, but some of them do. We know, for example, there's a species called Leisler's bat that likes to live in the trees here, and or Benton's bat, which will live in either buildings or trees, but we know that they roost in some of the trees here at Kedleston and feed over the lakes as well.
What about some of the species of tree? Are they all oak, or do we have a variety of ancient trees?
The majority of the ancient trees at Kedleston are oak, but there are a number of ash as well, which are fantastic trees. On the backgrounds at Kedleston there's a handful of really lovely hollowed out but still standing and healthy ash trees, which we hope will survive this disease called ash dieback that's in the country at the moment and is affecting some woodland areas, but there's no evidence that it's here at Kedleston as yet. We also have birch, which have probably self-set. They're not something that is usually planted as a part of a designed landscape. Trees that are, though, tend to be trees like beech, which we have good numbers of at Kedleston, and chestnut as well, particularly horse chestnut. One of the reasons why horse chestnut is popular in parklands is it produces such beautiful flowers at this time of the year, and they are an important source of nectar for invertebrates. And then the last tree type I would like to mention that's really important at places like Kedleston is the hawthorne. Again, mostly not planted, but some are, and they're really important because, as people will know, at this time of the year, in May, the hawthorne is in full bloom, and that's a really important source of nectar for the invertebrates that live in the big old ancient trees like this oak we're standing by. Most of the adult free-flying stages are species that nectar on flowers. It's actually their other stages of their life cycle, so it's particularly the larval stage and the pupal stages that live in the ancient the decaying wood, and it's the larval stages that are actually really in reality are the main part of the life cycle, because they might actually be in the tree for 5 or 6 years before they actually pupate and then hatch out as an adult insect. What I always like to say about ancient oak trees in parklands is that they might live for about 900 years, say, and they spend the first 300 years of their life just growing into a nice big open crown tree. They then spend the next 300 years just existing, and then they spend the last 300 years slowly dying. And it's in that last 300 years when they're slowly decaying and dying when they are of the highest value for wildlife.